Hello, welcome to episode 227 of the Craft House Magic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK, and today is the 13th of October, so welcome everybody. I hope you've all had a lovely crafty couple of weeks since the last time I podcasted, and I'm here to share all the things that I've been making since. So last week I just decided I had to cancel the podcast just because I was really busy and I'd got visitors. My parents came as well, so I just thought it's best just to delay the podcast till this week. I also hadn't got an awful lot to show you, but I do have quite a few things now. So today I have some knitting, some confessions, oh dear, a couple of questions from the Ask Me Anything thread. That's on Ravelry, but you can also email me on crafthousemagik@gmail.com. I've got some information on my shop at the end of the podcast, as well as a little appearance from Jensen, and he'll be wearing the mittens that I've got to show you in the knitting section. So we have a couple of Makalongs going on in the Ravelry group and on Instagram, and I'll leave details to those in the description bar down below. So let's get on with the knitting, shall we? So first of all, I have some finished mittens to show you, and these are the Little Waiting for Winter mittens by Susan B. Anderson. And I have added an I-cord in between them. I decided to do it about 36 inches because I've got one of Jensen's jackets, and I measured roughly the length from hand to hand, and I added a few inches as well, so hopefully that isn't too much. I will try them on him at the end of the podcast and you'll see whether they fit. So you could see on the last episode that I'd actually knitted the smaller size, and they were way too small, so I ended up knitting the 2-year-old children's mitten instead. I did get row gauge, so I don't know whether it's because perhaps my length gauge was a bit out, but the width gauge was what the pattern actually said. But I've just knitted the 2-year-old mitts now, and they are slightly big for him, but of course that gives him a bit more grow room as well, and they won't just be wearable for a couple of months, so that's good. So I knitted them in some Aran weight yarn that I got in my stash from my shop actually. The this base has got neps in it, and a while ago I decided not to have it in the shop properly because I didn't like how the neps sort of came out of this weight of yarn, so I decided just to stock the plain Aran. But these two colours are from my Fade to Grey mini set. I haven't got them listed as full skeins in the shop at the moment, but if you do want them, just drop me an email and I'm happy to dye them for you, just on the plain Aran weight yarn rather than the one with neps or any other weight of yarn that I've got in my shop. So there we are. Those are the little Wait for Winter mittens, and hopefully that I-cord isn't too long. So I did it a 2-colour I-cord, just to blend the 2 colours together, and the mittens I've actually done them opposites so that they're sort of contrast to each other. I thought that'd be fun as well, but still very cute even though they're supposed to be for a 2-year-old. I think Jensen has got slightly bigger hands for his age, one because he's a boy, and I think because he was quite sort of developed when he was born, he's quite large for a 10-month baby, because when we've taken him to baby club there's babies that are sort of 16 months old and they look a similar size, so I think he's just quite a big baby. So hopefully they'll fit him at the end of the podcast. So the next thing I've got to show you is another finished object, and it's something that my lovely mother-in-law Liz has knitted, and this is the Lone Skein Shawl by Joji Locatelli. So this is a new pattern that came out maybe a month ago, and it's got some beautiful lacy details on there. There's several rows of these lacy details on the shawl. It is obviously one skein, and at the edge of the shawl is a little picot edge, and you do have the option to do some tassels from these picots, but there wasn't enough yarn to finish those off, but I think it looks nice just with a picot edge. One thing I would mention is that Liz did sort of follow the instructions with the cast off edge, and it just says about how to do the picot, but it doesn't say about what cast off edge to do between the picots, and she's done a stable bind off, so when I blocked it I wasn't able to fully block out the sort of kink that you always get when you've got a a sort of crescent shape for a semicircular shawl, where there's sort of bump in the centre, so it sort of comes out in this side as well as that side, because I wasn't able to pull the cast off edge out as much as I normally would if I did a very stretchy bind off. So my advice would be is to do a stretchy bind off between the picots, because I think that would give a slightly better finish, but it's still really nice, and actually when you've got it on I don't think you'd notice that there is a sort of bump in the middle. So with this one, there's several sort of ways that you could wear it. You could wear it across your shoulders and have like a shawl pin to the side there. Once I sort of arranged my hair a bit better, have a shawl pin, or you could wear it like I quite often do as a sort of a scarf around your neck, like so. And it is quite a long version of a shawl, so it does come down here for a one skein shawl actually, which I think is quite nice, and you could spend a bit more time arranging it around your neck a little bit, but that is a brilliant pattern for a one skein shawl. So the yarn that I've got, and well, Liz knitted up for me from my stash, is a beautiful yarn from Ducky Darlings, and it's called Stormy Skies, and it was on her merino nylon 75/25 base, and there was 425 meters to 100 grams, and I think because Liz is quite a loose knitter, she ended up not having enough for the tassels, but you may well have enough, and you may well have enough to do sort of a partial amount of tassels if you're a slightly tighter knitter than Liz. And of course they do vary as well, the amount of meters that you get on a skein, and your tension will affect whether you've got enough for the tassels at the end as well. But it's a beautiful mixture of sort of greys, turquoises and purples and pinks in there, from Ducky Darling. I'll show you the label of the yarn. That's Ducky Darlings in the Stormy Skies colourway. So that's a lovely addition to my shawly wardrobe. So next, I have a work in progress to show you. Now, so I've not had much knitting time in the last couple of weeks, but I have made a start on my Stephen West Twist and Turns mystery knit along for this year. Now, if you haven't started yours, I've done very little, so there's not much of a spoiler, but if you don't want to see how the beginning looks, skip along to the timestamp on the screen or in the description bar down below. But this is what my Stephen West make-along looks like so far. It's very, very little. So there is a detail along the side which is going to look like this, but when you've just knit it, it looks like this. Very interesting. And I've only done an inch and a half, I'd say, less than that, but you can see the two colours that I'm using for my main colour and one of my contrast colours. So I've chosen the main colour to be the sort of yellowy goldy colour, and the turquoise is my contrast colour, because he said in the information video, which shows you how to do some of the steps, that actually the contrast colour will be more of a sort of a pop than the other one, and I really like the turquoise better, so I've chosen that to be the contrast colour rather than the main colour. And you can see that it's going to have this sort of loopy effect when it's done. You're basically making these strips. The first one's an I-cord, and then you've got these little tubes where you're casting on and casting off sections of knitting, and then you twist your bottom one and start pulling the loops through like this, so you end up with a really cool effect. Like that. So I'm really excited of how this is coming along, and I'm hoping to catch up by next week. Fingers crossed. So we shall see. So you can see my colours are turquoise, brown and golden, sort of an umber colour. Excuse my cakes, my ball winder is just playing up at the moment, so I'm thinking about getting a new one. But actually, the needles that I showed, I think on last week's podcast, the company that sent me those to try out are actually going to be doing some ball winders in the same material as those needles. So I'm really hoping that I can get one in that material, because it is gorgeous. Anyway, I digress. But that is my Stephen West MKAL, and I'm so hoping to catch up next week, because there's already another clue out today. So I'm at least going to get halfway through the second clue, hopefully by next week. Lots of hard knitting. I know, I'll do it for you guys. It's so much fun though, knitting all the different patterns that he works out. So clever. And also he does quite a lot of little tuition videos that go along with the Makalong, so it makes it a lot easier to work out what he's doing, because sometimes, because it's a bit of a different way of doing things, it's nice to be able to see him doing it and what it looks like in the end of every clue. So I'll always watch the video and then skip along to the end, just to see what it looks like before I finish it myself. So that's lots of good fun. I do have the set of yarns that I've got for my Stephen West in my shop at the moment, as well as 2 alternative colour sets that I designed for the MKAL. I have chosen a merino, cashmere and nylon base for mine, but I also offer it in just a merino and nylon base as well. Right, so next is my confession section. Right, I have got an awful problem with buying books at the moment. So I had started fixing a pair of Adam's jeans by doing some Sashiko stitching on the knees with some patching to sort of fix them up. And then somebody chatted to me about or mentioned to me about Borrow, which is a style of Japanese sewing which encompasses Sashiko as well. So I looked up some books because I thought, well, I'm going to get a couple more books that are talking about this technique, so I can learn about them in more depth, and also make it so that the people who sort of write it out get paid by me purchasing the books rather than just getting the information online. So I've purchased these 2 books. This one's Borrow and Sashiko, Harmonious Imperfection, and this one focuses just on sort of mending techniques, which is Sashiko as well. So Borrow is the technique of sort of layering up fabric and stitching over it to form sort of a patchwork of materials, but holding it together with Sashiko stitching. And so Sashiko stitching is a style of Japanese stitching as well. And the book has got several sort of projects that you can do, like this sort of kimono style jacket on the back there, and there's a number of different examples of different types of Sashiko stitching, and quite a few different projects that you can do in there. I have had a flick through both of these, and this one is more like not just mending, it's all sorts of sort of things that you can create from other pieces of fabric, whether it be reused or just freshly used, whereas this one focuses particularly on sort of mending process. And there's a couple of nice designs that I thought it says about in this book, including sort of patching up little parts of the straps on a dress and patching up knees on jeans as well, which is what I'm doing. And it's nice that actually these 2 books both talk about step-by-step guidelines of how to do sort of repair techniques. And I've realised that after I've looked at these 2 books, I probably could do with using a larger patch on the back of where I've patched up Adam's jeans, just to make sure it's going to have a bit more longevity. So I popped links to these books in the description bar down below. So those are the books that I've purchased, but I also purchased some fabrics. So I got these 2 fabrics from my local quilt group. They were having a little sale of some fabrics and they were Christmassy, so I thought that would be really nice to make myself some Christmas bags. So I've bought myself 1/2 metre of each of these, which I absolutely don't need because I've got my own sort of fabric shop stored in this very room, so I really don't need any more fabrics, but I thought I'd treat myself. And they are just standard quilting cotton, but with a bit of a Christmas theme. So that is my naughty purchases for this week, and I must admit I have purchased a few other things, but because there's Royal Mail strikes at the moment, they've took a little bit longer to get to me, so I don't look quite as guilty. So so I can show those on next week's podcast. So I've got a couple of questions for the Ask Me Anything thread from the Ravelry group, but one of them is actually a question for Adam, so I'm going to leave that one until the Jensen's new clothes section at the end of the podcast, because because Adam's always looking after Jensen when I'm working, might as well all be there in the video as well, so we'll keep that question for the end of the video. But I do have a question that's for me from a lady called Hazel. So she was saying that she's been knitting ferile socks for a teenager, and the pattern suggests using 72 stitches on 2.5mm needles, and she found that these were too tight. Even when she went up to a 2.75mm needle, this was too tight, and she'd asked me to help. So first of all, I don't know exactly what the pattern is and where the ferile is on the sock, whether it's all over the foot, which will make it more difficult to fit, definitely. To be honest, I try and avoid making ferile socks that go all the way down the foot as well. I have made a few with a small amount of ferile knitting around the cuff, which is doable, but much easier than having to do a full length ferile sock. I've knitted quite a few mittens, but I think they're slightly easier to fit because you haven't got the heel to get the sock right over. So it does make it more difficult, so you have to be a little bit more careful with your gauge. So what I'd suggest, Hazel, is you measure how many stitches per inch you get, say with a 2.75 or a 2.5mm needle, and work from there. So I'd look at what how the stitches look when they're finished, decide, oh, do I want to use a 2.75 or 2.5mm needle based on that, really. So do I like the look of it? Do the stitches look nice and neat? And then measure your gauge, because gauge is so important when you're doing ferile knitting, especially with sock knitting as well. Sock knitting anyway, I would say that gauge is really important, and it's important to make sure that the sock is big enough to go around your foot and have a little bit of stretch in that material to get over your heel. With ferile knitting, because you've got those floats on the back of the work, you don't get as much stretch, so it's much harder to fit. So you need to make sure that you're getting more or less the exact fit rather than negative ease like I would suggest for a normal sock. So I've got a video that I talk about sort of getting a sock to fit generally, which I'll pop a link to in the description bar down below, so you can check that out in terms of working out how many stitches you need for a standard sock. In that video I say that I do negative ease of sort of 1.5 inches to 2 inches around the leg of the sock, but for ferile knitting I'd actually go for sort of 0 ease. So you're knitting the more or less the right width for your leg, really, because you're going to find it difficult to get over your leg. It does depend on how stretchy your particular ferile is, because I know that I knit ferile really tightly, so I need a little bit more room in there rather than negative ease. So I would make sure you measure your gauge and then use the stitch count that would give you enough room to get your leg into that sock. And I would find that generally, because it's a ferile sock, it won't be so sort of well fitting anyway, because you have all those ferile stitches and less stretchiness in that sock. I would suggest picking one that's got a rib across the top, so that will hold the sock up nicely without having to worry about getting the leg of the sock, the rest of the leg besides the ribbing, to fit snugly to hold it up, if that makes sense. So absolutely make sure that your gauge is spot on to get socks that really fit really nicely, especially with ferile knitting. So I hope that helps. So the next section is shop update. So I have the November yarn clubs will be available on the 21st of October until the 6th of November, and they will be shipped on the 18th of November. There will also be a winter version of the sort of project bag and yarn set that I've done for the other seasons of this year, and that will be available in December. So I just thought I'd mention that is going to come along this year later on. So it's over to Adam and Jensen to show you what Jensen is wearing, but also for the question from the Ask Me Anything thread for Adam. So Jensen, you've got your new mittens. Are you excited?
Yeah.
Let's see whether Daddy can get them on.
Come on. This hand in here. You can do it. Put your hand in.
Oh dear. So while you're trying to do that, Adam,
yep.
we had had a question from Linda that said that now you've worked for Craft Ice Magic for a year, is it what you expected it to be? And what are your thoughts a year on?
Yeah, well, I suppose I knew what was going to be involved because prior to leaving my other job, I did help out a bit, and obviously I've seen what Ellie does from day to day. It's a little bit different because we've got him, which we didn't have before, did we? And he does take a lot of my time up, so Ellie can carry on and doing the dyeing of the yarn and making of the bags, etc.
You do help me a lot though.
But yeah, I do try and help.
And when Jensen's old enough, he'll be able to help a little bit for a bit of pocket money.
Yeah, of course you will. I don't know if he's going to put these on.
No, is the cord long enough though? We can just check.
So. Let's have
or is it too long?
I think it'll be okay.
Like I did him a bit longer so that he could sort of have them hanging out of his jacket, out of his sleeves. Yeah, he's not going to put them on.
So let's have a look how long. So they're a little bit long, but I think that's ideal. If he's walking along, they fall off.
I've chopped you off there, Adam.
He's not gonna lose them, and then we can then slip them back on again, just like this.
When he doesn't want to put them on. He seems to be going through a phase at the moment where he doesn't want to do things like sit in his high chair.
Yeah.
So it could be to do with that. We shall see.
Yep.
Hopefully you'll want to put them on when it gets a bit chilly.
Yeah.
So thank you very much to you both for appearing on the podcast.
Okay. Wait, bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Gonna wait, bye bye. Bye bye.
So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye.